June the 6th, 1944. Half a world away, the largest invasion in human history is hitting the beaches of Normandy. Harold Russell is not there. He is standing in a training field in North Carolina, and he is running late. The briefing about Normandy has gone on far too long. There are still 1,000 men waiting to go through a live explosives course before dark. So they hurry. Harold Russell picks up a block of TNT with a defective fuse. He will never pick anything up with those hands again. 2 years later, that same man walks onto a stage in Hollywood and wins 2 Academy Awards in a single night. The only person in the history of the Oscars to win twice for one performance. 45 years after that, he sells one of them, and the Academy tries to stop him. Tonight, we're going to tell you why he did it anyway. But before we get to that auction room in New York, you need to understand something about the man sitting in it. Because almost nothing about Harold Russell went the way anyone expected, including the way he ended up in a Hollywood film in the first place. He was not an actor. He had never been in front of a camera in his life. And the day the war took his hands, he was a sergeant nobody outside his own unit had ever heard of. He was born in Nova Scotia in 1914. His father died when he was 6 years old, and the family moved south to Massachusetts. He grew up in Cambridge. He left school. By his 20s, he was working in a food market, cutting meat, stocking shelves, going home at night to a small apartment. In the book he wrote years later, he was blunt about how he felt in those years. He said he had come to think of himself as a failure. Then came the 7th of December, 1941. He enlisted the following morning. He wanted to be a paratrooper. The Army looked at him and decided he would be more useful somewhere else, teaching demolition, explosives, how to build a charge, how to set a fuse, how to do it fast and do it right, because the men he was teaching were going to have to do it under fire. So that is where he was on the morning of D-Day, Camp McCall, North Carolina, 13th Airborne, a sergeant with 1,000 men to get through a live explosives course and a schedule that had already collapsed. He was 30 years old. He would later say something about that day that is worth holding on to. He never described it as bad luck. He never described it as unfair. He described it almost flatly as something that happened while he was in a hurry. The next place he opened his eyes was a hospital bed in Washington. Walter Reed, Army Medical Center. 1944. This is the part of the story that Hollywood would later film, and film beautifully. But the real version happened here first, without cameras, over months. They offered him a choice. He could have artificial hands, plastic ones, shaped and colored to look like the real thing. From across a room, most people would never know. Or he could have hooks, steel, obvious, unmistakable from 30 feet away. He chose the hooks, not because they looked better, because they worked better. The hands that looked like hands could not grip. The hooks could. And Harold Russell had decided something in that hospital that would shape the next 60 years of his life. He was not going to spend them hiding what had happened to him. Then came the harder part, which was learning to live inside that decision. He learned to write his name again. He learned to light a cigarette. He learned to pick up a coin from a flat table, which is far more difficult than it sounds, and which took him a very long time. Years later, he would joke that there was almost nothing he couldn't do with the hooks, except pick up a dinner check. He had gone in expecting a ward full of broken men. What he found instead were amputees who joked and complained and got on with it. That, more than any doctor, is what pulled him through. And somewhere in that building, someone from the Army was watching him. In 1945, the United States Army made a short film. It was called Diary of a Sergeant. It ran about 22 minutes. It was made by the Army's own film unit, and its purpose was practical, to show wounded veterans coming home that a life was still possible. They needed a real amputee, not an actor pretending. Someone who could be filmed doing ordinary things, signing a paper, holding a cup, opening a door, and make it look like what it actually was, which is difficult and learned and possible. They chose the sergeant from Cambridge. Harold Russell does not speak a single line in that film. He simply does things, and the camera watches him do them. Meanwhile, in California, a director named William Wyler was preparing a film about 3 servicemen coming home from the war. Wyler had spent the war years filming combat missions himself. He had come back with permanent hearing damage. He did not want a Hollywood version of coming home. He wanted the real thing. And then somebody showed him 22 minutes of an Army training film about a sergeant with 2 hooks. Wyler stopped looking. He offered the part to a man who had never acted, could not have named a single technique, and had exactly 1 qualification for the role. He had lived it. The film was called The Best Years of Our Lives. It came out in 1946. Russell played Homer Parrish, a young Navy sailor who comes home to his family, his street, and the girl next door, with hooks where his hands used to be. The story is not really about the injury. It is about everything around the injury. The mother who cannot look, the father who talks too much, the neighbors who are kind in the wrong way, the girl who says she still wants to marry him, and the terrible fear that she is only saying it out of pity. And there is one scene. Homer takes the young woman upstairs to his bedroom, and he shows her what it actually means. He takes the harness off. Without it, he cannot open a door. He cannot pick up a glass of water. He cannot put himself to bed. He is telling her, this is what you would be signing up for. It is one of the most defenseless things ever put in an American film, and it very nearly did not get made. The censorship rules of the time made studios nervous about anything that intimate. It stayed in, and when the film opened, letters started arriving, not from critics, from veterans, and from the families of veterans who had been living some version of that bedroom scene in their own houses and had never seen anyone put it on a screen. William Wyler, who directed some of the most celebrated performances in the history of the medium, later called it the finest performance he had ever seen on a screen. Harold Russell was not sure he had given a performance at all. As far as he was concerned, he had simply been asked to be honest in front of a camera. March 1947, the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. Russell had been nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He was up against Claude Rains, Charles Coburn, Clifton Webb, men who had been working in film for decades. Nobody thought he would win, including, it turned out, the Academy itself. The Board of Governors wanted to honor him. They also assumed he had no chance in the category, so they did something they had never done for a performance before. Earlier in the evening, before the major awards, they gave him an honorary Oscar of his own for bringing hope and courage to his fellow veterans. He came up and took it, and he did not accept it for himself. He accepted it, he said, in the name of the thousands of disabled veterans lying in hospitals all over the country. Then the ceremony went on, and later that night, the envelope for Best Supporting Actor was opened, and the name inside it was Harold Russell. He had won the one they were certain he could not win. He got to the stage and managed very few words. 2 in one night, he said, was too much. He was also that night the first person ever to win an acting Oscar without being an actor. In the entire history of the Academy, only one other man has ever done it. Nobody in the history of the Academy Awards had ever received 2 Oscars for a single performance. Nobody has since. It happened once, to a man who had never acted before and who would barely act again. Because here is what nobody in that room knew yet. The most remarkable thing Harold Russell would ever do with those two statuettes was still 45 years away. When the film wrapped, William Wyler gave him a piece of advice. Go back to school. There aren't many parts in Hollywood for an actor without hands. It sounds harsh. It was simply true, and both of them knew it. So the man with 2 Academy Awards on his shelf enrolled at Boston University and studied business. He graduated in 1949. In the same year, he published a book about what had happened to him, which went on to be translated into 20 languages. And then he did something Hollywood almost never forgives. He left. Over the next 50 years, Harold Russell appeared in 2 more films, one in 1980, one in 1997. 2. That is the entire screen career of the only man to win 2 Oscars for one role. He was not bitter about it, and he was not chasing it. When people asked why he had walked away from Hollywood, he tended to point out that Hollywood had not exactly been waiting. What he did instead was work for other veterans. He served 3 terms as National Commander of AIM Vets. In 1964, President Johnson appointed him chairman of the President's Committee on Hiring People with Disabilities, and he held that job in one form or another across 6 presidential administrations and nearly 30 years. That is the part of his life that got no statuettes. Decades of committee rooms, hearings, and employers who needed convincing that a man with a hook could do the work. He and his wife Rita had been together since they were children. She died in 1978. He remarried in 1981. He was in his late 70s when the bills started coming in. His wife needed surgery. Harold Russell was 78 years old. He had a veteran's pension, a modest life in Massachusetts, and medical costs that his income did not cover. He also had 2 gold statuettes on a shelf. He made a decision that a great many people would spend the next several weeks telling him was wrong. He consigned his Best Supporting Actor Oscar, the competitive one, the one nobody thought he would win, to an auction house in New York. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences moved to stop it. Since 1950, every Oscar winner has had to sign an agreement promising to offer the statuette back to the Academy before selling it. Russell had won his in 1947. He had signed nothing. Legally, the Academy could not touch it. So they tried the other way. They asked him not to do it. They offered to lend him money instead, a smaller sum, quietly, so the sale would not have to happen. He said no. On the 6th of August, 1992, in a room in New York City, the Oscar went up. It sold to a private collector who never gave his name for $60,500. And the criticism came exactly as everyone had predicted. How could he? Doesn't he understand what it means? Doesn't he have any sense of history? Harold Russell answered all of it in about 2 sentences. He said he didn't know why anybody would be critical. His wife's health mattered more than sentiment. The film, he pointed out, would still be there, even if Oscar wasn't. Go back to that field in North Carolina for a moment. A man in a hurry, on the worst afternoon of his life, holding something that is about to take his hands away. 48 years later, the same man, using the steel hooks that replaced them, signed the papers that let a gold statuette go so that someone he loved could have an operation. Those hooks are the whole story. They are what the war left him. They are why Wyler cast him. They are what he was holding when he stood on that stage in 1947 and accepted an award on behalf of men who could not be there. And they are what he used at 78 to give the award away. He kept the honorary one, the one the Academy had given him because they were sure he would lose. That one stayed on the shelf. Harold Russell died in January of 2002 at 88 in Massachusetts. He spent almost 60 years being told he was an inspiration, and he never seemed comfortable with the word. What he said instead was simpler, and he said it so often that it became the line people remember him by. "It is not what you have lost," he said. "It is what you have left that counts." He was never talking about hands. So here is what we would like to ask you tonight. If it had been yours, the proof that the world once stood up for you, and someone you loved needed help, what would you have done? Tell us in the comments. We read them. And if stories like this one matter to you, you can join us as a keeper of the light. You'll find the join button right below this video. However you choose to support us, thank you for being here with us. Stay with us. Help us keep his light alive.